Hello and welcome back to another Rock Records Reviewed. My name's Adam, and this week, as a tribute to the late, great Jeff Beck, I'm going to take a look at his top 10 tracks. As I'm sure you know, Jeff Beck died quite unexpectedly on January the 10th after contracting meningitis in hospital. And his recent funeral was possibly the biggest gathering of rock royalty since Live Aid, and a pretty clear indication of just how much love and respect and admiration Jeff Beck was held by pretty much everybody in rock music and beyond. I guess this isn't just a tribute to Jeff. I'm hoping it serves as a sampler to those of you out there who might not be as familiar with his music as you'd like, or have heard a lot about him since his death and want to investigate further. Either way, this is a list of 10 stunning pieces of music that help make up a hugely impressive body of work and a pretty dazzling legacy. I've talked at length about Beck in my top 10 albums, but I think it's worth reminding ourselves of just some of the qualities that made him such a wonderful musician. He was constantly shape-shifting and always learning new techniques and ways of expressing himself and his music. And where other players found a style and a niche for themselves and stayed there, Jeff was a true artist. He kept looking to develop his skill and explore new music right till the very, very end. He constantly sidestepped expectation, his last album, for example, making a record with Johnny Depp, of all people. And as a result, perhaps never reached the level of fame and exposure that his Yardbirds contemporaries, like Clapton and Page, did. But I think in a way we should be grateful for that. He famously ducked out of playing Woodstock, for example, as he didn't want to have his name forever associated with that event, or kind of on that famous poster stuck in time like a museum piece for us all to gawp at and reminisce about. And that kind of tells you everything you need to know about Jeff Beck as an artist and as a restless spirit, I think. Among us guitar players, it's pretty much an unspoken truth that Jeff was the guitarist's guitarist. It's not even unspoken truth. We speak it all the time. We love talking about stuff like that. But you know, other players had more fame, they had more money, they had more success, but none of them had the skill or even the admiration of their peers to the level that Jeff Beck did. So I think let's take a look at the top 10 tracks by the fabulous Jeffrey Arnold Beck. And at number 10, I'm going to put Heartful of Soul. This is one of the seminal Jeff Beck Yardbirds tracks, you know, along with sort of Still I'm Sad and Over, Under, Sideways, Down. It was really the point, I think, at which he stamped his individuality on guitar playing. You know, everybody else was coming from the blues, and Jeff very much had that in his locker. But he also picked up influences from rock and roll players like Cliff Gallup and even Ravi Shankar, who he claimed he got into before even George Harrison and the Beatles. And the story goes that they had a sitar in the studio and a sitar player in the studio to record the solo to this, but sitars are infamously difficult to tune up. It was a hot day in the studio. They couldn't get the thing in tune. They were wasting time and money, and Jeff eventually just piped up and said, just let me do it on the guitar. And he did. And so was born his unique feel for that really identifiable vibrato, where he's finding notes in between the notes, which instantly requires tremendous dexterity and precision and a tremendous musicality. At number 9, from 2016, I'm going to put Scared for the Children. This was from his Loudhailer album, which was a great example that I was talking about earlier of Jeff just sidestepping expectations, because nobody expected him to team up with an unknown Camden alt-based punk girl duo, Bones, featuring Rosie Bones on vocals and guitarist Carmen Vandenberg. And it was such an out-of-the-box and totally left-of-field collaboration. It was just wholly in keeping with Jeff's fascinating career choices. But the resulting album, Loudhailer, is great, and I think one of his strongest. This track is perhaps one of the more conventional songs on there, and it's really a beautifully sweet sort of melody, very gentle, compassionate lyric about the state of the world being so bad that we're scared for the children. But its centerpiece, though, is this explosive guitar solo that very, very neatly and cleverly references Jimi Hendrix's Little Wing. Brilliant album, his last great album, I think, and very worth going to check out. At number 8, I'm going to put Blue Wind. And Blue Wind was from his Wired album from 1976. Jeff was a huge Mahu Vishnu Orchestra fan. Mahu Vishnu Orchestra was John McLaughlin's band, the great jazz fusion player, who was actually Jeff Beck's hero. Jeff became firm friends with Jan Hammer, the keyboard player in the Mahu Vishnu Orchestra. Yes, Jan Hammer of Miami Vice theme fame. And in fact, when George Martin who had produced his previous album, Blow by Blow, when he had to bail out producing Wired, it was Jan who stepped in to save the day. He had recorded a guitar line that Jeff played in rehearsals, and Jan wanted to turn it into a bigger piece. He could hear some potential in it. Jeff didn't like the guitar line. He thought it was a bit kid stuff. He thought it was a bit throwaway and basic. But when he heard how Jan had integrated this into a full piece blasting out of these massive speakers, he was absolutely blown away, and Blue Wind was that resulting piece. It's a great example of collaboration and the energy and the arrangement in the piece. It's very, very powerful, quite unusual, and you get drawn into it the more and more you hear it. It's deceptively simple, that guitar line, and then it explodes into it's a great piece that was a wonderful live showstopper with Jan and Jeff trading licks like men possessed, sort of pushing each other to higher and higher levels of mind-blowing virtuosity. And number 7, I'm going to put from Jeff's Guitar Workshop, Big Block. In some ways, this was Jeff's comeback album. He'd been largely dormant for many, many years. And mainly sort of playing on other people's records, and perfectly happy doing that. But he was tempted out of retirement by his record company, who sent him the artwork to this album before it was even made, and it was Jeff working on a guitar in what sort of looks like a car workshop. And this appealed to both of Jeff's passions, guitars and cars. He loves hot rods. He loved hot rods. Did Jeff? And so Jeff decided he got a band with Terry Bozzio and Tony Hymas. So that's a drummer and a keyboard player. So this was a bass guitar-less album, which kind of gives it a cold mechanical feel, but that really does suit the sort of car repair shop-like concept of the whole thing. And Big Block is, of course, slang for a car engine. And this is a song that you can really get your hands dirty and greasy to. It's a nasty piece of music, and I mean that in the loveliest way. It opens with this bluesy rumble of licks before it bursts into life with some of the dirtiest riffing that you'll hear this side of the South Downs. It's another live showstopper. It's great fun to play live. I've done it myself. You can have great fun with the improvised blues licks at the start before you launch into one of those really meaty, crunchy riffs with guitar players love throwing shapes too. Number 6, I'm going to put 'Cause We've Ended as Lovers. From his 1975 Blow by Blow album. This is a Stevie Wonder tune. Stevie and Jeff had long had an association ever since they wrote Superstition together, which they kind of did, even though Stevie takes all the credit for it for some reason. Jeff was never a great one at imposing his what he was deserved from songwriting on other people, as we'll find out in other songs. Stevie had written this as a song for one of his muses, Cyrita, and it's a lilting, powerful melody, and it really appealed so much to Jeff that he decided to turn it into one of the great guitar instrumentals. Produced by George Martin, sounding absolutely beautiful, this really is one of those yardsticks in guitar playing. It's lyrical, it's powerful, it's graceful, and it's full of so much control, yet so much assertion. It's a powerhouse of guitar playing and absolutely improves on the vocal version by Sarita by some distance. It's undoubtedly Jeff Beck being considerably more expressive with his guitar than Sarita is with her voice. And number 5, I'm going to put Bex Bolero from his 1968 album Truth. This is in many ways Jeff Beck's signature tune, even though many others have become to be just as highly associated with him over the years. But at the time Beck was signed to Mickey Most, the Jeff Beck group was signed to Mickey Most. The Jeff Beck group was obviously Ronnie Wood and Rod Stewart in there as well. But Mickey Most wasn't really interested in the band. He was interested in Jeff, and he wanted to turn Jeff into a pop star. Now, this is not something you can do if Jeff is not interested in playing ball. And what happened was that Mickey Most gave Jeff Beck Hi Ho Silver Lining to release and to sing and release. And Jeff wasn't really a singer. He was in a band with Rod Stewart, for crying out loud. And actually, you can hear Rod Stewart on the chorus of Hi Ho Silver Lining. Mickey didn't really rate Rod Stewart for some bizarre reason, but Jeff didn't like the song. He likened it to having being forced to wear a pink tutu and drive down Oxford Street on the top of a double-decker bus. He just found it a bit embarrassing. But the B-side was a different story. We were in the studio one evening with Jimmy Page, Keith Moon, Nicky Hopkins, and John Paul Jones. What a lineup that is. They went into the studio and they came out with Bex Bolero, so called because of the bolero rhythm at the start of the song. And it soon sort of morphs into a classic rock riff that Led Zeppelin would be proud of. Which is a very salient point, as Jimmy Page claims to have written this song and in fact has the credit for it, even though Jeff disputes that. So another one of those songwriting claim disputes. It's generally thought that this session was the genesis of Led Zeppelin. So the first time the idea of Zeppelin was mooted, and with John Paul Jones and Jimmy Page there. So the song does have a broader historical musical context than just its musicality. But it's a track I've always loved. And when I hear those acoustic guitars at the start, I go right back to 1967. And I wasn't even born then. And number 4, for another track from his Blow by Blow album, I'm going to put Scatterbrain. Jeff Beck used to play a very fast scale in rehearsals in the dressing room to warm his fingers up before a show. And at rehearsals one day, the great Max Middleton, his keyboard player at the time, said he'd put some chords to that scale run and that they should make a full track out of it. And the result is the kind of absolutely dizzying Scatterbrain. Even more dizzying once producer George Mighton got on board for the record, because he added some incredible strings to it. This was a bit of a risk at the time. George wasn't sure that people would want to associate Jeff Beck with strings that could be seen as a bit schmaltzy and kitschy, but it actually all sounds phenomenal. The production, the playing from everyone is fantastic, and you have this whirlwind of guitar notes before it breaks into something so sort of cool and sophisticated, but really, accessible and still very rock. And there's kind of almost nothing like it, and it's very, very 70s, which I love about it as well. So the top 3, number 3 is another track from Jeff's Guitar Workshop, and it's Where Were You? This is another kind of lilting, reflexive piece, but the tone here is outstanding and astounding, really. It's just rich and it's full and it has such depth to it. And there's so much space in the piece for Jeff to play with those notes. And he kind of plays straight, save for the moments when he throws in just these ridiculously subtle, hard to pull off bends, and then he adds harmonics, and then he bends harmonics, which is an insanely difficult thing to do well. So the touch and the feel, the soul, the musicality that you need to play like this really are on another level to pretty much everybody. Richard White, the keyboard player from Pink Floyd, famously said that Jeff Beck was his favourite guitar player, much to David Gilmour's chagrin, and Jeff Beck indeed played Where Were You at Richard Wright's funeral at the band's request. David Gilmour, incidentally, and Jeff Beck were very, very good friends. At number 2, I'm going to put Goodbye Pork Pie Hat from Blow by Blow. Sorry, not from Blow by Blow. This is from Wired. Sorry. Now, this is a Charles Mingus piece that Jeff Beck covered, and it's an absolute lesson in economy and atmosphere. And when you hear him play like this, you can actually clearly see why he was David Gilmour's hero. It's so sparse, and the pace here is just sublime. And again, the instruments sound incredible. Production's wonderful. Jeff rings these amazing tones out of his guitar at first. Then he adds a little heat under the tone, but every note is clear and it's precise and it's interesting. There's nothing wasted here at all. Every sound of the guitar, every scratch, every lick is driving the music forward. He even throws in a beautiful refrain from Singing in the Rain, and it's just lovely the way he does it. Mingus was so impressed with the cover that he felt compelled to write to Jeff Beck and say how much he liked it, indeed adding that Jeff Beck might even want to cover another couple of his tunes. which makes me smile. Even the jazz greats have to hustle sometimes. But my number one Jeff Beck piece is perhaps a little bit off-centre, not generally regarded as one of the great classics, but certainly over the last few years it's had much more exposure and praise. And it's Nadia. Now, Beck was driving in his car when he heard Nitin Sawhney's track Nadia come on the radio. It was a vocal track. And he was so overcome he had to pull over and listen to the track more intently. And he knew on the spot that he wanted to cover it, but also because it used lots of Eastern half tones and quarter tones, it would be incredibly difficult to play. And it's said that he used recordings of a bird that used to sing on his windowsill outside his kitchen to play along to. He recorded the bird singing, and then he'd copy all those little sort of tiny little quarter notes that the bird would sing. They're not notes that you normally play, certainly not in Western music. But when he felt ready, he went into the studio and recorded what, for my money, is one of the great instrumental covers of all time, and really one of the high watermarks of guitar playing. So it first came out on Jeff's 2001 album, You Had It Coming. And that version was mind-blowing enough, but it's really the Live at Ronnie Scott's version, with Jason Rebello on keyboards, Tal Wilkenfield on bass, and Vinnie Colaiuta on drums. That's the one that will blow your socks off, watching him do it. You can see it on YouTube. I think Live at Ronnie Scott's is one of the greatest live albums of all time, and a pretty good place to start if you want to get into Jeff Beck for the first time. And this, for me, is the finest track on there. It's modern, it's exotic, it's melodic. Somehow it has the Eastern atonal feel to it as well, and it's a bewildering display of intricate bends and subtle tone shifts. He uses the tremolo arm, the harmonics, a slide, the volume. I mean, his sheer control of everything that's going on with the guitar, and the speed of thought and the profound musicality needed to wring notes out of the guitar. I've never heard anyone play like this before. It's absolutely sublime and pretty much impossible to replicate well, and I've replicated it very badly many times. It's not just one of my favourite Jeff Beck pieces, but it's actually one of my favourite pieces of music of all time. When I heard it for the first time, I could not get it out of my head for a year, I kid you not. So that's my top 10 Jeff Beck pieces. There are so many other great pieces I could have chosen and would have loved to have spoken about. Shapes of Things, particularly the version on Truth, I've Been Used, Hammerhead, Star Cycle, Brush with the Blues, Stratus, Freeway Jam. Just go find a Jeff Beck playlist and go and investigate it and let me know what you think. Just to finish, I never knew Jeff Beck, but I know a lot of people who did know him. Some of them knew him very well. Some knew him socially and some professionally, who toured with him. And to a person, they all thought he was a really lovely guy and great company. And at the end of the day, I can pontificate and pompously prattle on about the music forever. But at the end of the day, isn't all that really matters just being remembered so fondly as a lovely person? I saw him at the Albert Hall last year, and he was playing as great as ever. He really was. And I've got no doubt that he had so much more to give us, even though he was 78. He seemed in great shape. He lived a very healthy lifestyle. So I feel a bit sad, really, not least because it's also difficult to not feel that the lights are kind of slowly going out on the classic rock era that we all love so much. I guess we'll always have the records, though, and the music. But look, let me know what your favourite Jeff Beck pieces are. And on yet another sort of slightly sombre note, I will say goodbye. But I'll be back very soon for another Rock Records review. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.